Hello there.
He's no good to me dead.
We're fine. We're all fine here now. How are you?
I think you'll fill in nicely.
This is where the fun begins.
Now, today, we are extremely blessed to be joined by someone who is at the very start of it all. He has worked on a total of 53 films, including Superman, Highlander, and Krull, but perhaps most notably for the sets of A New Hope and especially Empire Strikes Back, where he and his team created the aesthetic of dozens of alien creatures, and I'd say especially everyone's favorite Green Jedi Master. You may have heard of him, Yoda. He currently operates That Yoda Guy movie exhibit in conjunction with his amazing Follow Your Star Foundation on the beautiful Dutch side of the island of St. Martin of the Caribbean. Please help me welcome That Yoda Guy, Nick Maley. Nick, how are you today?
I'm cool. It's like 8:45 in the evening now, so it's how am I tonight, really, I think. But no, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's always a little strange since the island is now sort of devoid of 90% of the tourists that we normally get. So my days are kind of caught up with making things and trying to sort through things. So it's kind of different from when I saw you last.
Certainly. That's the world as we know is completely changed, and I'm trying to find some positivity in that. We were just saying before I hit record here how I'm also I was in the cruise industry, we'll say beforehand, and it really has forced me to kind of embrace the creative side. I've started a lot more voiceover work and podcast editing and podcast producing, so really embracing that creative side of things. So again, just trying to find the positive in all of this craziness, and hopefully we get back on track sooner than later, and we can send more people to the incredible exhibit that you have down there. Like, I walked through there, I think it was in 2016, I believe it was. And you were gracious enough to, again, just like chat with my brother-in-law and I, two guys just wandering in off the street. We chatted with you for, I think, 20 minutes or so. We were just asking you these bizarre questions like, what was Harrison Ford like on set? Or what was it like to actually see Yoda created? And you were just so gracious and welcoming and warm.
Yeah, I think we're I may be wrong, but I think we're the only place in the world where someone can just wander in without paying entrance for a convention or something and access a Star Wars alumni and ask questions about things and get answers. What I'm trying to do generally is inspire people to believe in themselves and follow their dreams and be all they can be. And so, that takes a degree of conversation to do that. I try to help people understand that they don't have to do what everybody else is doing. They don't have to live a life that's exactly the same. In fact, if I had lived a life like that, no one won't be coming to see me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the basic nature of it.
Yeah, I know for me, Nick, like my day job is in a helping profession. And one of the biggest things we look at when we help people change their life is deciding who they want to be and actually being true to themselves. So to hear you speak about that and just the gift of giving people, Star Wars is one of those things that Pat and I we've known each other for 20 years now. And it's the thing we bonded over in high school. It really brought us together as friends, and to be able to offer something like you offer for people, like you said, to wander in and be able to connect and talk and ask questions. It's an amazing thing. Really grateful for that.
Well, yeah. And Nick, you just humanized the process for us. Like, it was like, people think of Hollywood and they think of these large scale movies, and it's almost like it's placed on like this deity-esque kind of plateau that you think is just like completely impossible. Like, where do you even begin? But again, as you said, you just allow people to wander in off the street and have access to your vast wealth of knowledge and history and, you know, your experience, as well as the
A
artifacts that you have
large
as well.
a large part of this is just believing that it's possible. You know, one of
Mm-hmm.
the things in my little book of big ideas, I say, you can't achieve what you don't believe. If you don't believe it, then you don't invest any time in it. And if you don't invest any time in it, it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
And you know, I talked over the years. I've talked to lots and lots of people that have come in here, and I'm sure that it goes over the heads of 90% of them. And you know, there are some that wander out and think, "Who is this crazy guy?" Right? But I've had two people who came in who wanted to work in movies, and both worked on Rogue One.
Get out.
So,
Wow.
and those
Wow.
were just people that wandered in and wanted to do it, but were just receiving a lot of negativity from other people that thought it was, you know, an impossible dream. And another quote from my book, I say, if you don't invest in your impossible dream, you're the one who guarantees it won't come true.
Wow.
Amen, Reverend.
So
Amen.
true.
Oh,
Sure.
that's but it's so true though, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you just sit back and wait for it to happen, it's not going to get there. So, you know, I had a childhood dream of being a animation cartoon actor. And so it took me until I think I was 31, 32, I think it was, before I finally said, well, first step is to, well, A, you know, do your homework, and then just get a microphone and just start talking. Just start somewhere. Put one foot after the other, and um, you know, it sounds like that's exactly the message that you're pushing, and you know what a lot of people need to hear.
Yeah, it's really, first of all, you have to decide where. You can't necessarily decide precisely what you want to do, because most people, you know, people when they start out, one of the big problems I think facing everybody in life is when they reach that point in their teens when people start pushing them to make a decision about how they're going to spend the rest of their lives when they have absolutely zero experience to base their decision on. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so they're gonna just kind of pick something that seems like a good idea, but through that journey of heading in that direction, I mean, how many people go to college and take a course that then when they leave college they completely abandon and they go do something else, right? You know,
Pat.
I mean, that happens. That happens all the time, and you know what I try to say to people is have a rough idea of where you want to go, build on what you've got that no one else has got, because that makes you the red tree in the forest and you've got to stand
Mm.
out. It's no good being another green tree. And as you head in that direction, you know, just be open to networking. And like a sailboat might go towards the wind, but it can't go head into the wind. It tacks this way, it tacks that way. Eventually, you'll get where you're trying to go. Just make the most of each opportunity, but do it in a practical way. And the most practical thing that you have to understand is it's going to be hard. You
Right.
know, if you turn around and think, oh, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a degree, I'm going to come out, I'm going to be a famous movie director, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. As soon as, you know, the plan starts to fall apart, you feel the world's ended and you've given up. If you know, if you understand from the very beginning that it's going to be hard and things are going to go wrong, and things are not going to work out the way that you thought they would, but you have basic principles of trying to get 1 centimeter closer to where you want to go every single day, not next week, not next month, but today. What are you going to do today that is going to get you 1 centimeter closer to where you want to go? So one little tiny thing, one tiny step at a time, moving
Mm-hmm.
you towards where you want to go. Eventually, you've got to get there. It might
Well,
take 20 years, but
yeah,
you've got to get there.
It's like, and I only know this because it was Martin Luther King Day in the States the other day. We're Canadian ourselves, so we see it through all the
Okay.
social media and everything. But what did Martin Luther King say? He said, if you can't fly, then jump. If you can't jump, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. Just no matter what, keep going forward. But on that note,
Mhm.
Nick, I'd love to know how you got your start in special effects, which I believe part of our conversation when I first talked to you was that it was not called special effects back then. It was called makeup design or makeup artists.
No, they would not really. That's not really
Okay.
quite right. You know, when you're making movies, there are different departments, and you might think of them all as special effects, but actually, there are specialists in each area. The
Okay.
guy who blows things up often is not, is a specialist in that area. The guy, and he's not going to be the guy that's doing prosthetic makeup on, on Harrison Ford or somebody else, right?
I'd hope
So
not.
we're all yes, exactly. We were special makeup effects artists. You know, I started out as a makeup artist when I was a kid. I thought I'd be a comedian because comedians were always top of the bill. So I was more interested in entertaining the other kids in the class than I was in most of the exams I took. And I realize now that I had learning disabilities that no one had put any handle on at that time, um, particularly being. Uh, I won't say horribly dyslexic, but dyslexic enough not to be able to spell 17 words out of 20. And so I would keep failing all my English exams just because I couldn't put those things together. I'd have all the right letters, they'd just be in the wrong order. And I also had attention deficit where I just would sit in the class and it would all wash over me and I would kind of go into a daydream and it just didn't seem important to me. So my dad was an actor, so I did understand that you could live outside the box, and that was the first thing for me. I would he would do what was called summer season, which is like a cabaret show for people that are on holiday. And so, they'd put on a show at a seaside resort or whatever else. And so he would do that. And then in the winter, he'd do ice shows. He was a singer and an actor. So, he would, sing for Aladdin or whatever it was. And then he would voice one of the characters as well. So, so, I grew up partly backstage, and school didn't seem really terribly relevant to anything that I was doing. When I was when in England at 11, they have or had an exam, I don't know if they still have it, called the 11 plus. And the 11 plus was where they decided whether you were a stupid kid or whether you were smart enough to go work in an office or a bank or something like that. And so at 11, I failed all of those exams. And so they sent me to this really rough school for dummies. And when I was 13, so I'd been there a couple of years, one of the teachers explained to me that all of these ideas that I had, all of these fanciful fantasies, as he put it, were a crock of nonsense. And that life really wasn't like that. That I was going to work in a factory and I should take up woodwork and I should focus on metalwork, because if I did that, maybe one day I'd get to be foreman in the factory. Well,
High aspirations. Yeah.
this came as a kind of like a bolt of lightning to me, because it had never occurred to me that the people who were supposedly teaching me and the people who were supposedly my leaders had already come to the conclusion of how I was going to spend the rest of my life at 13 years old. And so I, he said I needed to get serious, and I did. I got serious to prove that he was completely wrong. And so, a lot of the principles that are in my little book are all about how I went from low income housing, being a kid at 13 that was already written off, to rubbing shoulders with movie stars and doing the rest. And a lot of it is just about determination. It's about believing in yourself. I thought, well, what do I have that I can excel at that none of the other kids have got? I thought, well, I hang out with actors. I'll do the drama thing, right? I gotta know more about that than the other kids, right? So I did that first of all, and my form teacher had me starring in a couple of school plays, and then when I was 15. He wanted to put on a play that I found really, really incredibly boring. So I unilaterally declared that I was going to put my own play on. I didn't ask anybody. I just stopped going to his classes and sat in the main hall and figured all the stuff out for my play and did my whatever thing. And at 15, I produced my first play. And, it was a play with only 4 people in it. But along the way, I discovered some other things as well.
Well, what a sense of accomplishment, though, right? Like, at that young of an age as well, just having that success and that, like, I can do it.
Well, there was a lot more of understanding what you can and you can't do. Because, we go to school where we are all packaged into a disciplined way of behaving. We all have to follow the rules. We all have to do the stuff. And a lot of it, it's not fun. I hated it at school. They say school's supposed to be the best years of your life. I was thinking to myself, God help me if this is the best of it. So. Our school was such that once you came in the morning, they locked all the gates so you couldn't get out. And and they have barbed wire on the top of the gate so that anybody who tried to climb over the gate, got screwed. There was only one gate that wasn't locked, and that was the front gate. And the school was like a horseshoe. And so all the classes looked into this garden area, and there was a long path that went to the front gate. And to get to the gate to go onto that path, you had to go past the headmaster's office. So I'm putting on my own play, and I thought, I need some props. I need to get some stuff for my play. So I figured if anybody stopped me, I'd say, yeah, I'm going to town. I'm going to buy some stuff for my thing. So I walked straight past the headmaster's office. I went out into this little road. I walked down the pathway where every other class is got big windows facing this pathway. I went out through the front gate, and I went to town, and I bought my stuff, and I came back again. And nobody said a word, because if you look like you should be doing something, everybody assumes that you should be doing it. I mean, who would be so stupid as to walk past everybody to go out? So after that, I did it every week. I mean, I just kept on doing my stuff. My play was pretty good. I'm sure it wasn't brilliant, but, it was good for that school standard. And I discovered that that I could, number one, achieve something, and number two, I could get away with things that I didn't know that I could get away with. I just needed to have confidence in myself, confidence in what I was doing, and a good backup story. So that was it. That was how I got through. When in that particular school in England, if you were going to a dummy school, then you left school at 16. That was it. You went to work in the factory at 16.
Right.
So I had kind of from 13 up to 16, I had shown them all that I was worthy of more than they thought I was at 13. So I went on to like a college of FE and further education. And while I was doing that, I started a drama society because it had worked for me at school. I did it again. We wrote our own reviews and other things. And I had such a good time at college. I didn't want to leave. So I just kept on signing up for another year. I'd say, oh, well, I haven't taken those courses. Let me take those. Oh, no, I really don't want to go to work. No, I really don't want to do that. Anyway, during that time, because I was doing these drama things, I'd learnt stage makeup from my dad. My dad was teaching stage makeup at drama school as part-time when he wasn't doing other shows. And so when I was 14, I earned pocket money at the end of term by helping him teach the much older students at drama school how to do their makeup for the end of term productions. So he's got 20 to 30 people that he's got to teach how to do their makeup for a particular show in 2 hours. And so he would go round and do the designs, and I at 14 would wander around behind him and say, no, you don't sharpen an eyebrow pencil like that. And no, look, you can't mix those two colors together. That's going to turn grey. Makeup's going to get all muddy, right? You're going to do whatever. Right. So, and I think all of those things helped to give me a sense of confidence. When really, if I knew as much as I know today, I'd realize that I shouldn't have had any. But that's the way of it. Another thing in my book, I say, that one of the benefits of youth is that you don't know enough to know that you shouldn't be able to do what you just achieved.
Ooh, I like
awesome.
that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want a tattoo now.
yeah. The bottom line is, as you get older, you know all the things that can go wrong, and consequently, you allow all of those things to stop you from doing what you wanted to do. There is a time where you just have to take your courage in both hands. A bit like being a sailor, you go off to sea. The boat could sink, but if you think about that, you never get off the dock, right? You've got to just take your courage in both hands and go for it. And that paid well for me in different movies that I made. So when I was 17, I got home earlier than my mum and my dad, and the phone rang, and it was someone who wanted a makeup artist to do a job at the Royal Albert Hall. I don't know if you guys have ever been to England, but the Royal Albert Hall is a big, prestigious, very, very prestigious concert hall built for Queen Victoria's cohort, her husband. And they didn't know they were talking to a 17-year-old. So I discussed the job. I told them what they needed. I asked them to send me the photographs of the people that they wanted me to work with. I negotiated the price for the job. I charged 3 times what my dad would have charged. And so my first professional job was at 17 as the head of the makeup department at this show at the Royal Albert Hall. And I asked my dad to come along and, as my assistant, just to make sure I didn't get into too much trouble. But in the program, it was, Nick Maley and Len Maley, assisted by Len Maley. So that was the first job. So my dad had worked on, I also realized at about this time, sorry if this is too long a story.
No, this is beautiful.
But when I was young, I had this idea I'd be a performer. When I got to 17, I realized that people had been lying to me and that I wasn't going to be tall and handsome. And that, if I was going to be a performer, I was going to be unemployed most of the time. So I decided, well, maybe I should make the most of this makeup thing. It's something that I've got that other people don't have. Certainly people my age, I should... I knew from theatre that there were an opera company might have a makeup artist who did the makeup for the people for the show. Most theatres didn't do that, and they were all badly paid. So I thought, well, working in movies would be better, and it's more glamorous, So I wrote to the people who made movies, and I said, I'm 17, and I just did a job at the Royal Albert Hall. So I must be a whiz kid. Give me a union ticket so I can make movies. They didn't bother to reply. It was just like... So a little later, my dad got sick. And to make sure that the jobs were still there for him when he got better, I left the college that I was in and I started taking over all his classes. So I was teaching at drama schools and at Middlesex University when I was 18 years old. Again, just about, if anybody stopped and asked me, are you qualified to do this? What the hell could I say, But no, it was, a degree of BS, believe in yourself, make it look like you're supposed to be there, and people will just make space and let you do your thing.
It's like Catch Me If You Can.
That's almost.
Only in a little bit of a different industry.
I started to teach at college, and I thought, well, I got to make the most of this. So I wrote to the people who made movies again, and I said, look, I'm 18 years old. I'm teaching at Middlesex University. I got to be a whiz kid. You should give me a union ticket. Give me a union ticket so that I can make movies. Well, this time I got an answer. I got this letter. I was really excited. I got this letter and I opened it up and it said, thank you very much for your information. We've got it on file. If we need anyone, we'll be in touch with you, which is really the same thing as saying, please don't write to us again. And, at that point, most people would say, well, I gave it a shot. Yeah. I tried.
Yep.
I wrote to them. They said they would call me if they needed anything, but I guess they didn't need anything because they never called me. Right?
Yep.
Well, I'm telling you lots of things that are in my book, so forgive me for that if it sounds like a plug.
This
but
is a great preview.
one of the things that I say there is that people who fail are the ones who give up. Right? If you don't give up, if you keep banging on the door, eventually the people on the other side of the door are so sick of the noise that they let you in, right? So instead of giving up, my dad had worked on a movie called Oliver. I got him to find out from the people who were the makeup artists looking after those actors. Where they held their union meetings. Yeah. So I found out that they held their union meeting on the same date every month so that no one could forget what day it was. It might be a different day of the week, but it was always the same. I can't remember, the 3rd of the month or something like that. Right. And they held it at this pub in London. So I went and I showed up at their union meetings every month for 2 years until they knew I wasn't going to go away. And eventually, when there was a surge in the film industry and they were short of people, I was one of 10 makeup artists that they took into the business in a 15-year period. So there were 10 of us that were let in 15 years. So perseverance, talent is all well and good. Perseverance is what succeeds. You don't have to be the most
Boom.
talented guy. You have to be the one that's still standing when everybody else gave up. So that was how I got my union ticket. And that, a lot of people would say, wow, that's it. That's the end of the story. But it's not actually. It's really just the beginning of the story, because
Certainly.
given 3 weeks, what they needed me to do on the first movie that I made was with Charlton Heston and Christopher Lee and a bunch of other famous people. And so I thought, this is it. I've made it. I'm here. 3 weeks later, well, they didn't need me anymore. Hey, here I am. I'm unemployed. And and so, I very quickly discovered what it is to be a freelance worker and to just be sitting by the phone, waiting for the phone to ring. And so I had a new set of issues. Instead of trying to just break into the film industry, now I needed to find who were the teams of people that I needed to network with in order to be one of those guys that was working more than one of the guys that was sitting at home. And once again, perseverance is what succeeds. And one of the people that I targeted was Steve Freeman, who had built the apes for 2001: A Space Odyssey. Again, being unconventional, I used to get a periodical. Back then we didn't have the internet, so you didn't know what was happening where or how it was,
Right.
what things were happening. But I got an industry. It was like an industry magazine paper thing, and it told of all the different films that were being made and where they were being made and who were the heads of department in each department, etc. And so I would see where Stu was working. And I would just I'd save up my pennies and I'd go to the studio where I knew he was working, and I would just walk through the gate like I was supposed to be there. I'd go early in the morning when I knew everyone was arriving. If anyone stopped me, I'd wave my union card at them and said, "Oh yes, I'm working with Steve Freeman today," which wasn't true at all. And then once I got into the studio, I'd wander around and I'd hang out until lunchtime, and then I'd go to the canteen and I would wait for him to come into the canteen, and I would buy a cup of tea and I'd go sit on his table and I would start a conversation just so that he knew who I was. I would go to the union meetings, even though I really didn't have anything to contribute. I would stand up and say something. Didn't really matter how stupid it was. I would stand up and say something, because when you stood up, the chairperson would call your name out and everybody in the room would know, oh, he's the new guy, Nick Maley. Okay. So, it was just about people getting to know me. So that one time when their old friends were not working, their friends were working, and they needed someone, and they pulled up the list of who was unemployed, my name would stand out, because I was that weird kid who'd sat on the table and talked to them and done.
You're familiar. You're in their face,
Yeah.
literally. So
Exactly.
in the face, top of mind, right?
So
good on you.
that was how I got to work with Stu the first time, which was on a movie called Young Winston, about Winston Churchill, and
Wow.
he gave me 2 days' work, I guess, doing beard work to find out if I was any good.
Try out kind of thing.
Right. Now, once again, while I was unemployed, I could have just sat and watched the television. But that getting 1 centimeter closer to where you want to go every day made me at least sit and dress beards or practice art or do something that was going to improve my creative skills while the television was on in the background or whatever else. And one of the things that I had done, I'd managed to get a false beard off of one of the shows, and so for 6 months I spent all my time with a book of a hairstyle and beard book, period beards, dressing this same beard. I'd wash it, make it all wet and scraggly, and then I'd make it a sixth beard, and then I'd make it another beard, and then I'd make it something else, and then I'd make it something else. So when he gave me this job working on the House of Commons in 1880, I knew what I was doing. And so, you know, you don't want to ever be, you know, a normal anything. The first chapter in my book says, you can't live an exceptional life by being normal. The two things are at odds with each other. And so when you get to be qualified for something, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer or whatever else, well, now you're joining a new group of normal. In my case, I was makeup artists. You know, what was normal for the makeup artists, especially those ones that were dealing with the crowd, was that they would, you know, come in the morning, they'd get the people ready, they'd get them on set, and then they'd sit around and tell stories and eat bacon sandwiches and drink cups of tea.
Get that catering table good stuff.
Yeah. What I would do is, on these 2 days that he gave me, I would get my guys ready and on the set. And then as soon as I got on the set, I would pull the people I'd worked on out one at a time, sit them down, and do a more complex makeup on them to turn them into classic kind of characters. You know, I'd say, well, I got a beard and whatever else, but this guy smokes too much, and he smokes on this side, so this side of his moustache has got, you know, bits of yellow staining and various other things, and he's, you know, and I would turn them into characters. The other makeup artists that were working with me, they got really pissed. You know, one guy called Ernie, he said to me, look, you can't do that. He said, if you do that, they'll expect us to do it too.
You're gonna make us work harder.
Yeah, right.
Your excellent talent.
Yes, right. Well, by the second day, all my characters were being pulled out of the crowd and put in front of the crowd because they were more interesting behind the main actors. And instead of working with him for 2 days, I worked with him for 16 weeks, and we went on location to Morocco and made, you know, the Moroccan army look like whirling dervishes and English lancers and other things. So during that time, I befriended Stu's son Graham, who's an unsung hero of Star Wars. People never talk about him, and a lot of the characters in the Mos Eisley Cantina were characters that he sculpted. But, you know, Stu always kind of hogged the publicity, and so, you know, even his son didn't really get a lot of mention. So, so something else in my book, I say, you know, you have to focus on the little jobs as well as the big jobs, because the little jobs lead to big jobs. And, you know, you might think that this is a natty little thing and it doesn't really amount to anything, but give it 120% anyway, because, you know, that job I did, I was there for 2 days working on characters in the background that were sitting, you know, up in stalls in the Houses of Commons. You know, you could say, well, it's a nothing job, but you know, I made something of it. And in the same way, I really wanted to do. I get bored easily. Maybe that's my attention deficit. I don't know. You know, I don't want to spend all my time making pretty people look prettier. It's much more interesting to make pretty people look pretty ugly. And so I would, you know, I wanted to stretch my wings. I wanted to go further than that. But Stu wasn't employing me as a makeup effects artist. He was employing me as a makeup artist. But his son Graham was getting commercials, and one of the commercials that he got was with Donald Pleasance for a lager ad, which took place in a pub that was filled with horror characters. So Frankenstein was there, and the Mummy was there, and the werewolf was there, and Quasimodo was there. And so I helped Graham make those characters in his front room. and we went and did that particular commercial, just a little one-day commercial. Actually, we shot about 3 of them in the end, but so again, you could say it was not an important job, but when Stu got Star Wars, and was, because he built the apes for 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Chewbacca was really based on the work, that technology. Well, they couldn't find enough people to do the job to create all these characters for the Mos Eisley Cantina, and Graham suggested to Stu that he should give me a shot. Right, the little job led to
the big job,
the big thing,
the big one.
that ultimately, none of us thought that movie was going to be anything, that special. This is
that was one of our questions. We were going to say, did you actually think that it was going to be as big as it was when you started?
This is the 70s, okay? And
Right.
we're making a movie about gunslingers and wizards in space. I mean, seriously.
Right?
Who is
That's what
going
it
to
is.
take that seriously?
Yeah.
Honestly, right? We thought, oh, it's some kind of boys' own kids, teenagers thing. But you still give it 120%, because you're a freelance worker, and who knows, there might be somebody there who later on, gives you a break. In the same way, one of my guests on Starnet in a few weeks is going to be one of my old colleagues, Colin Arthur, who was doing Ray Harryhausen movies, and I worked with him on a couple of jobs, one of which was Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. I think that was about 1973. And we had the 2 tallest guys in England who came to Colin to get their feet cast so that they could get their shoes made on the National Health, because their feet were so big you couldn't buy shoes. And one of those guys was Peter Mayhew. And right?
Awesome.
And so and he wasn't the tallest guy. He was 7'2", and the other guy, his name I think was Chris, he was 7'6". So, but he was an accountant, so he didn't want to work in movies. So when Colin was doing Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, he got Peter to play the Minotaur.
Interesting.
Didn't get to see him. Who is he? He's just a thing there rowing.
Right.
Another kind of nondescript sort of job. I think he was the Cyclops Trog type character as well.
Okay.
But the production supervisor and myself both went to work on Star Wars, and we recommended him to play the part of Chewbacca.
Oh, no kidding.
It's about networking.
It is
about
100%.
It's about making the most of those contacts. In my book, I say, look, there's always those people in your class or those people at work that you think are a waste of space. There's always going to be someone that you think is a nerd or whatever else, but it's the nerds that change the world. It's not the guy on the basketball team. They might be good at what they do, but they aren't the ones that change the universe. The universe is changed by those weird characters that do something that no one else is doing, and in the same way, just network with everybody. You might think that guy says stupid things. Be nice to him. Take pity on him if you like. Say he hasn't got any friends. I'll be his friend, right? Because you don't know. In 10 years, he might be the one guy who turns around and said, this was the only person who was nice to me when I was at school. I'm going to give him the job, right?
100%. 100%.
Network.
Mm-hmm.
100%. No, that's...
there's two things I'm hearing from you, like very specifically. One is networking, because you just said it. And the other, I think it was Mark Twain that had said, don't let school interfere with your education.
Yeah, right.
And just everything.
That's a great quote.
Yeah. Everything you have said just speaks to that, of how, you take what you kind of need and you leave the rest, and you treat people with respect, and you never know when you're going to get your opportunity just by being a good person.
Well, talking about school, there's several interesting elements there. I don't know whether we should be diverging like this, but people put so much emphasis on school, and I'm not saying it's not education isn't important. It is important, but people have been pushed to make a decision at too early an age on what it is they're going to do for the rest of their life. They're heading in a direction they don't know whether it's really going to work out for them. They get all kinds of focus on, you've got to get this grade and this grade and this grade, and then you're going to pass this, and then you're going to get that, and then you'll get your degree or whatever it is. Do you know, of all the exams that I passed, at all the time that I extended my education, I got all these certificates. I didn't have one person who ever asked me to show them my certificates. I could have gone out and said, "Oh yes, I've got a Master of Arts in in whatever, I have a Bachelor of Science in Physics, I could have said anything, right? No one ever asked me. It just never came up.
Yeah.
The exams that I did pass, I passed because I learn't how to pass exams rather than learning the subject.
Exactly, and that's that's the flaw in the modern education system, is it's who's the best regurgitator as opposed to who can consolidate and understand and apply practically that information that you're getting. So and the best way to do what I just said, the latter, I think, is, as you're saying, just real world experience. And if you don't have it, then, as you've said as well, fake it till you make it, and just kind of
that really rough school that I said that I went to. It had 3 tiers. Okay, so each year had an A stream, a B stream, and a C stream. Remembering that these are even the A stream people are people who failed all their exams when they were 11, right? Okay, so the C stream people were really the dregs of society for their age, right?
The beauties, as we call them in
Yeah,
Canada.
right. Yeah. So there was this one guy, I don't remember what his name was, who was like at the bottom of the C stream. He was considered to be virtually uneducatable, and he went through school and he got to 16 and he left, and he was so bad he really had trouble even getting a job in a factory, right? So eventually he answered an ad that someone had put in to go clean carpets for people in their houses. That was something that people would do. They would give you a van and a cleaning machine, and they would get paid, and they would pay you a percentage, and you would go to the house and actually do the job. So he went round and cleaned people's carpets. Once they'd shown him how to do it, it wasn't rocket science. Okay.
Right.
By the time he was 26. He owned 20 vans and had 20 people working for him.
Wow.
Cleaning carpets. And he sat in the office and watched TV while they went out and did all the work. Right?
Yeah.
It's about recognizing opportunities. It's about analyzing things. And don't ever come out and say, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that. If you're don't ever say you can't do something. If you want to, you can say, I can't do that yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
I like that.
Yet. Because you're capable of doing anything. I wasn't a good artist until I was in my 20s. I wanted to be an artist because I thought, I'd like to be an artist. But, I just thought it was a romantic image, probably.
Certainly.
But I wasn't any better than anybody else. When I was unemployed, rather than watching TV, I decided that if I focused on doing portraits and got to be a better artist, it would make me a better makeup artist. 1 centimeter closer every day to where you're
Every
trying
day.
to go, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I set myself this goal, and every day I would do 4 drawings in 6 hours, and the one that I liked the best I could finish. In 6 months, I was a good enough artist that people were asking me to do exhibitions. It was because I had done it day after day after day after day, and I'd made all the mistakes, and I had figured out how not to do it, right? The
Apply
people who
those.
fail, the people who fail are the ones who give up. It comes
Right.
back down to those same little catchphrases.
Like you're talking about opportunity, Nick, and what I'm kind of curious into is the opportunity. So we'd be regretful if we didn't talk about Yoda,
Okay.
and your experience working on Yoda and the opportunity to work on Yoda, how that came to be, and frankly, like where'd the inspiration come for the character Yoda? Like where was the inspiration to design that character?
Okay.
Where'd that
Well,
come from?
first and foremost, um, when you gave me such a wonderful glowing introduction, you kind of made it sound like it was me and my team. It wasn't actually the case. I was part of Stu's team, so I was one of the guys. But
Right.
let me just put that in proper context. When we started on the first Star Wars movie, I was the new kid in the creature workshop. And so no one trusted me to give me a solid character that was mine. I worked on bits of characters. So I made the eyes for a lot of the
Right.
characters that are in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Stu had this concept of just putting like dark eyes over in shells in things that so it was dark inside and you couldn't see the eyes of the people inside, and so you'll see they don't have moving
Yeah.
eyes, they've just got kind of like bead eyes. And it was snowing outside. We had this cold snap, and this we were using compressed air and an oven, and they had made a kind of little space for it, maybe because they thought being a compressed tank it wasn't safe inside, they had to put it outside. So they'd converted a space that I think originally probably held 3 dustbins. And
Wow.
and so no one else wanted to work outside, so Nick can go do that. Yeah, let's send him out.
Send the new guy. Send the
So
rookie.
that's how. Yeah. So it's not really like I was so brilliant that they decided I had to make all the eyes. It's just no one else wanted to go out there. So
You're doing the little jobs until you get the big job, right?
You do the little jobs until
That's
you
right.
get the big jobs. Yes, and tested me. They tested me on sculpting by giving me hands to sculpt because they were very short on hands. Graham was
Keep losing them in Star
knocking
Wars.
out a lot of these characters like Snaggletooth and others. He was sculpting those in a day or a day and a half at the most. And so I was sitting there. They had this fly character called Spizzit or something of that nature.
Right. Yeah.
And although it didn't have that name at the time, they all had what I'd call nursery names when we were working with them. And so I was sculpting sucker hands for the fly character, which ultimately got used for Pondo and all sorts of other characters in the
Cool.
thing. So I was doing that. Graham was needed to be sculpting, and he had been doing the foam latex. So I worked with him to help him with the foam latex, and by the time we were halfway through that production, I took over all the foam latex work to free him up to do sculpting. So I was making skins for Chewbacca and some of those other characters. Making warts for Greedo and the tasseled mohawk that went over his head. But I was the new kid on the block. I was a lowly junior, if you like. When we left that, we did a job for Gene Roddenberry, a really bad pilot for a series that never took off. And then we went on to Superman and Superman 2. And so it was like 3 years later when we came back to Empire Strikes Back. And by that time, I'd been working with Stu a lot of the time. And so when we got the new team together for Empire Strikes Back, instead of being, the new kid on the block, I was actually one of the 3 most experienced people on the team. Okay?
For sure.
So it's important to understand that as I progress with this. So instead of having this tiny little room that we had to build the creatures for the Mos Eisley Cantina, they'd made all this money and they gave us this big workshop. Really, it was a complex. We had a separate room for the foam work. That was my domain. I was the guy making, the foam skins for the Ugnaughts, and I knew I was going to make the skins for Yoda. And I prepared all the molds for Yoda, and Stu and I poured Yoda's head. I poured Yoda's ears and his hands and his feet because they weren't considered to be as important. I mean, it spent 5 months deciding what Yoda was going to look like. This was something of a nightmare. We had 10 months. We had 10 months to prepare, instead of 5 weeks to prepare for the Mos Eisley Cantina. We had 10 months to prepare and film. So we had to, I think it was considered 3 months of that was going to be filming. So we had 7 months to prepare, and they spent 5 months deciding what Yoda was going to look like. And so suddenly, we were thrown into this sense of turmoil of now rush, make the molds, do the stuff, make the skins, get the stuff out. Stu had his own little room instead of us all being in this one, tiny room. And he was working on Yoda, and Yoda was his baby. And Graham and I were building the Wampa. And there was also the head of the Tauntaun, animatronic head of the Tauntaun, that was in the main workshop, and we were doing life casts for Han Solo in carbonite and other stuff.
Oh, cool.
And as soon as we started filming, Graham went down on set as the chief makeup artist. So Stu is a designer, he's in his room, Graham is down on the soundstage. I'm the most experienced guy left in the workshop.
You're the head honcho all of a sudden.
Right? Suddenly, I'm not the new guy. We've got all these new guys come in, and they're all looking to me for me to tell them what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. Okay, so as they progressed, and it had been deciding that Yoda was going to be a glove puppet, and they started to talk to the Muppets about operating them and stuff like that. They suddenly got kind of insecure about the fact that they were never going to see Yoda's legs. Because if you think of the Muppets, you always see them from, either the hips up or at best, a long dress and the knees up, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't see Yoda's feet, the feet working. Mm-hmm. And so they asked Stu if he could build a walking Yoda for a long shot. It's not really important, just for a long shot, so we can see him walking through the trees. Well, Stu was desperately trying to make a mechanism in the last 2 months for the world's first animatronic superstar. No one had ever made a major feature as a puppet in a full movie, in a big movie, right? No one had ever done that. And so he had a lot of pressure on him. So he was in his room, working on that all the time. And he said, no, we don't have the staff. And we don't have the time to do it. You'll have to do something else. So who did they come to? They came to the guy who was running the workshop for him. Oh, yeah, that's me. Okay, right. So
out of the frying pan into the fire.
out of the frying pan into the fire. And so they said, can you figure out some way that you could make, an animatronic walking Yoda? So I said,
Not
something
yet.
something else that is in my book. Something else that is in my book is sorry, I've lost track of what I was saying. Can you make a walking Yoda? Don't ever turn down an opportunity. When an opportunity comes, you can honestly say, oh God, if I try to do this and I fail, people will laugh at me. If I just play safe, I'll get through the job and they'll employ me on another job. If I try to do something outside the box and I fail, I'm going to be the guy who failed. And so fear is self-doubt is the worst enemy that you have.
100%.
People
100%.
are scared of standing out in a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I say, if you don't believe in yourself, who the hell else is going to believe in you, right? So I said, excuse me, let me just ask you this. Why are we talking about animatronic walking Yodas? Because if Yoda is in the scene on his own and nobody knows how tall the trees are, he could be any height.
Right. It's all about perspective.
So why don't we do a false perspective, make a oversized Yoda, put it on one of the little people, and guess what? His legs work. And we don't have to make mechanical anything. So that was the first one that I did. And they must have thought I was all right because they got their shot. It's the shot of Yoda walking through the trees, waving at Luke to follow him.
Right.
And
Wow.
and so they thought I was okay. So then they decided that they needed a animatronic, a radio-controlled Yoda to go into Luke's backpack. Because, believe it or not, you can't get 4 puppeteers in a backpack. Their legs stick out,
It'd be
right?
tight.
Yeah, it just doesn't kind of work.
Just a little.
So, guess who they came to? They came to me and said, what about radio-controlled Yoda? Well, I hadn't done any radio control. Actually, at that point in time, I hadn't built any mechanisms either, right? I just worked around. I say keep it simple. Try to find something that if you looked at it from a new perspective, you wouldn't recognize it, and people would think you invented something new. So just try to just to look. If you're stumped, just sit down, stay calm, think about it. So I said, well, look, I really don't have the experience to do the radio control, but I could do the assembly. So we've got these guys in the special effects department who are making little robots that are running around on the floor. Get them, we give them the shell, get them to get a bit of head movement and a bit of jaw movement, maybe arms that come up that can be positioned, and maybe some finger movement. And I will put the skins on it and make sure that it's artworked and it's done.
It looks real.
So that was the second. Yeah, that was the second one that I got into. So by that time, Stu is still working on what we now call prototype Yoda. But I've already got the other 2 finished and they're done. So the production was thinking I was an okay guy,
Getting those stuff.
So finally we come down to filming Yoda, and they're filming in Yoda's hut. And Stu was trying to make a really complex, super lightweight mechanism that could be taken out of the skull, so that if there were any problems, it could just go in, take the skin off, unscrew it, pull it out, fix the problem, put it back in again, keep going. But one of the complex issues, first and foremost, eyes looking left and right and up and down are a hell of a lot harder than eyes that look left and right. Eyes left and right is just like putting a pin through eyeballs and swiveling them one way or the other. Any third grader could probably figure that out. Trying to get eyeballs that look up and down, suddenly that eyeball's got to pivot from the center of the eyeball.
Wow.
And you're putting eyelids over it that are in a space that on the outside of between Yoda's eye and his skin, the corner of his eye and his skin, it's like a quarter of an inch. And you're trying to put the eyeball in and the mechanism in. And then on top of that, Frank wanted his hand to pass through the middle of the mechanism so that he could get his middle finger to Yoda's eyebrows. So the mechanism had to have a big hole in the middle to do it. So Stu has made this mechanism that was shaped like the top of Yoda's head, and the mechanism kind of went in a curved shape. I'm waving my arms around, and people listening on radio kind of understand what I'm doing. But it would go up into the dome of his head and then come back down to the eyes, so it left the area clear. And he was working himself to death to try and get it ready on time. Yoda went down on the set. And periodically, he would lock up. They're also trying to get used to the puppet, and so we have Mark talking about how he had to try and keep a straight face when Yoda would be doing some insane thing, because they hadn't got the controls right, or because the mechanism was breaking down.
Well, certainly.
And so every time the mechanism seized up, and the puppet went out for 2 hours, for Stu to take the skin off, take the mechanism out, unlock it, put it all back together again, put it back on again, they were losing a lot of money. And so they came to that little guy in the workshop.
That Yoda guy.
That Yoda guy in the workshop. And they said to me, look, do you think you could build a backup Yoda? Whatever you can make in 3 days. Because, even if it's just got working ears, if it's just the shape of Yoda and it's got working ears, then we can shoot on the back of it, and we can shoot on Mark. You look at the scene of Mark talking to Yoda. Yoda's not there most of the time,
Right.
You just got a single. It's normal if two people are having a conversation. You look over the person's shoulder, so you see the person he's talking to. Yoda's not there most of the time. There's a couple of shots where he is. It's because the puppet was up in the workshop being unlocked and brought down again. So they said, just get it to do whatever you can, but do it as quick as you can.
Yeah, I remember I watched that that interview you had through your StarNet. I'll plug the StarNet Facebook group.
Okay.
The Galaxy That Britain Built. That's what it was. It was your interview with David Whiteley. I wrote that name down on here. Absolutely brilliant, and almost brought a tear to my eye when you were talking about how you created this other puppet, and then what it was doing, and when you saw that on set, I
was determined that I was going to make the most of the opportunity. So something else that's in my book, if you think you can deliver 100%, then, promise them 60%. Right?
Yeah.
And shoot for 120%.
Boom.
Right? If you deliver anything that's more than 60%, they think you're great because you gave them more than you said you would.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know what you're
Over-deliver.
shooting for. When you shoot for 120%, when you miss the 120%, there's every chance you'll hit 100%. Right? You're just stretching yourself. So I decided I was going to try to make a puppet that would do everything that they wanted the puppet to do. And whatever failed, whatever didn't work, I'd pretend that I hadn't expected it to do that. Right?
Oh, a happy accident.
Yeah, right. So I got one of the trainees to stay with me, and we worked straight for 3 days and 3 nights. And we built the puppet that you see in 80% of Yoda's scenes. It wasn't a nice mechanism. It was the first mechanism I'd ever built. But I had spent time with Stu. I had looked at what he was doing, which was really complicated. I mean, it was almost mind-boggling about how is this thing going to work? You know, what does that bit do? You know,
Right.
Whereas I believe in, keep it simple, stupid. And so,
Yes.
my mechanism wasn't going to come out of the skull. I literally acryliced it. I said, oh, we'd take a bicycle cable from the bicycle shop down the road, and we'd just acrylic that cable into the skull, right? That's in there. That's permanent.
Shoehorn it
That ain't
in.
going anywhere,
Yep.
right? But the point was that it never broke down. And so that was how that came about. And I in that video you're talking about, I got quite emotional because there is when you have spent 13 years striving to reach a certain point in your career, and you've faced all those periods of unemployment, you've faced all those challenges, those times when someone gave you a chance and you did your best, and maybe they didn't employ you for 16 weeks, maybe they only employed you for the 2 days, right? You went through that, and it wasn't just a couple of days. It was 13 years trying to reach that pinnacle. And when we're talking about the second Star Wars, we all knew this was the cream of the crop. This
It's
was the
something.
movie everyone was waiting for. Everybody was going to look at that. And I knew when I saw the first day's rushes, I knew that I was that I'd done something that people were not going to forget. And it
Yeah.
was
Oh.
that turning point,
Oh.
that point in your life, and it was very emotional. I sat in the viewing theater with a tear or two running down my face, because I knew that 60 hours that we put in 3 days, working all day and all night, sleeping for 2 hours at a time on the floor. I'd sleep on the floor while the trainee was soldering 2 bits together. And then he'd wake me up when he was finished, and he'd sleep on the floor while I fixed the next 2 bits together, and got to a point where I woke him up and said, do this, and I'd sleep on the floor. All of that suddenly came to fruition. So yes, of course, it was a very emotional moment. And talking to David, that was the first time that I'd ever really talked to anyone about it. And so I got kind of teary on camera, which I'm a bit embarrassed about, but it is what
Don't
it is.
you dare be.
Mhm.
That brought a tear to my eye.
Yeah.
I gotta say, like you could feel the amount of effort and work and heart and soul and blood and sweat and tears that went into this process, and the way you described it as working 60 hours in 3 days, that's unfathomable. So to actually, like, for that intense, relatively in the grand scheme of things, short amount of time, I can all but guarantee it did not feel very short while you were living in that moment. But 3 days having accomplished something that here we are 40 years later, over 40 years later, still talking about, still gushing over, still getting merchandise, getting children these days. Like my 3-year-old daughter knows on sight who Yoda is, and who
Sure.
like
Of
is
course.
it's this iconic piece of history that, as you
Right.
say,
Right.
people won't forget. So to get a little bit emotional about that, but I'm getting emotional on your behalf just talking about it. So
Okay, well, that's cool.
it's a beautiful thing you've created and gifted the world with, certainly.
Well, once again, I always say this was a team effort. I wasn't the only guy that was
Certainly,
there.
certainly.
Someone else that was really important was Wendy Midner. Wendy was the go-between between the Muppets and myself. And while Stu and I were working on, Yoda's head, she made the body and she sculpted the hands and she sculpted the feet. I phoned those, but she was putting all of that together. She was one of the puppeteers. She looked after it on the set. I say there's a whole group of Yoda guys.
Team effort.
I like
absolutely.
I like to say, you asked me where the inspiration for Yoda came from.
Yeah.
The answer to that was they paid me, but the truth
Green.
is that people think of Ralph McQuarrie's drawings when they think of how Yoda was designed. Yoda, all the early drawings were done by Joe Johnson, not by Ralph McQuarrie. Ralph McQuarrie did one series of drawings that were influential, and none of them looked like Yoda. Yoda started out as a Smurf, as a blue character with a beard and a little pointy hat, and at one point he was a garden gnome in kinky boots. Thank God we didn't stop at that point. But, all of those were done, by the illustrators. So I like to say that the illustrators were the sperm donors, and Stuart was Yoda's dad, and Wendy and I delivered the baby. And we had help from the guys from the special effects department, from the trainee who helped me, another trainee who sculpted the lip extension and made the lip look much longer on film than it does on any of the Lucasfilm Yodas that you see in exhibit, because they're pulling him out of the mold, and we changed the way he looked after he came out of the mold. Various things. There's a team of people there who all contributed something. Deep Roy, who was that little person who got inside the Yoda suit and was the person.
I did not know that was him.
Yeah, it was. And so all of those people were influential in the making of Yoda. Just some of us were more key than some of the others.
It takes a village to raise a Yoda, so it's
right, exactly.
It truly was a team effort, and each of you deserve every bit of praise and every bit of glory. And here we are again 40 years later saying, well done, great job. Like, you're still getting that. It's iconic. It truly is.
And I find it so fascinating, the difference, and obviously not just feeling it myself, but to hear you describe the difference going into A New Hope, and then the difference from being a part of A New Hope and then going into Empire Strikes Back. Like, just the difference in terms of what, in terms of what you were actually doing and where you had come from. It's just very fascinating.
The production was different too, because the first one, no one expected it to be anything exceptional. Right. And by the time we got to the second one, it broken all the box office records, and we knew that we were the guys that were suddenly all the cutting edge guys. We went from being a bunch of guys hoping that we'd get another job to being the it team that everybody wanted on their next movie.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's absolutely amazing. Yeah, Nick, we've taken up far too much of your time already. So, how about this? How about we end with a quick game, I'll call it, of this or that, where it's just some quick rapid fire questions and you say which one of them you'd prefer. Again, there's no right, no wrong answers. It's just purely this or that.
Okay.
Andrew, do you want to go back and forth, or should one of us just rapid fire it? What do you think?
Let's go back and forth.
Okay.
Because I really want to ask the last one.
And we can certainly.
So you start.
Okay, good. I'll start us off here. Luke or Leia? Which one do you think is more powerful in the Force?
I think Luke.
Han or Chewie?
Are we still talking about who's the most powerful?
No, this is just like personal preference, love of character.
Okay.
Preference.
Yeah, all right, Chewie.
Who do you like? Chewie.
Boba Fett or Vader?
They're
They're tough.
Yeah, I'd have to say Vader.
A New Hope or Empire? Empire Strikes Back.
Empire.
Me too.
A New Hope or Return of the Jedi?
A New Hope.
Millennium Falcon or the Slave One?
Oh, Millennium Falcon.
Easy. Okay, The Mandalorian or animated Clone Wars or animated Star Wars shows?
The Mandalorian.
You want to do the next one again, Pat?
Sure. Star Wars books or TV shows?
TV shows.
And this is the last one.
Oh, yes. Andy wanted this one.
I have to ask it because I've been wanting to ask you this ever since Pat mentioned that we were going to get the opportunity to talk to you. Live action or CGI version of Yoda?
Well, that's kind of a stupid question, really, isn't it?
It's an obvious question.
Yes, it's an obvious question. Of
leading
course,
question.
it's got to be live action.
Live action. So it brings me just really to a really quick talking point. If you can just comment ever so quickly, because it is a stupid, obvious question in the sense of obviously your contribution to the live action Yoda. What are your thoughts on the CGI Yoda? Because in episode 1 and episode 2, they went a different direction. Or no, episode 2 and episode 3, sorry. Episode 1, they still had the puppet. But
I lobbied them. I lobbied them. I wrote to them. Whether they have actually read what I wrote or they didn't, I don't know. But I lobbied them to keep Yoda as a puppet in episode 1 because I was afraid that they'd make him digital. And they did. And when I saw it, I was kind of embarrassed that I had encouraged them in that direction because I thought that the digital version that they did for episode 2 was much closer than the Yoda that they built for episode 1. I think personally, I feel it's water under the bridge, but I also had written that I thought Nick Dubman was a good person to head creature effects for episode 1 because apart from anything else, he had the continuity. He was one of the trainees that was in our department for Empire Strikes Back. And so he knew how Stewart had built the prototype Yoda because he worked with him very directly on Empire Strikes Back and really more or less kind of filled in my space on Return of the Jedi when I went on and did other movies. So he just seemed like the right person. He knew exactly how Yoda had been built. So I really couldn't believe that they made Yoda out of a different material, which was going to be heavier, which made him a lot less maneuverable. They built mechanisms that were much more radio controlled, which meant that you didn't get the organic feeling that you got in some of the others, and they made him out of a transparent material instead of an opaque material, and they resculpted him rather than pulling a plug out of the mold and using the original sculpt. I mean, I couldn't imagine that they could have made any more mistakes than that.
Yeah, because when I recall seeing episode 1, I found the eyes of the Yoda in episode 1 to be very different than I recalled him in the original trilogy.
I'll tell you what was said to me about it because I talked to them about it afterwards, and they said, "Oh, but Yoda has a different, emotional feed, through this one. He's feeling more angry, and he doesn't want to." He didn't say at the time he doesn't want Luke. Doesn't want Anakin to become a Jedi. He doesn't think he's right, and so we wanted to sculpt him with this different attitude. Well, when you sculpt a puppet isn't necessarily like a character. You have to sculpt that puppet in a central position that's going to allow you to make him look happy or sad or whatever else along the way. I mean, if he's a character who's supposed to be miserable all the time, then you give him a neutral, miserable look, but still leave the opportunity for him to smile and look like a sad person smiling. But you don't just completely resculpt the character from scratch. And the sculptor who did it is a very, very talented sculptor and does, really, really good work on a lot of different things. I don't really know how we got to that on that particular movie. But that doesn't mean that because the animation on episode 2 was better than the live action on episode 1, that was the right way to go. It just didn't build the puppet right in the first place, right?
Yep.
And I presume you're aware that I've been rebuilding Yoda for the last few years.
It's beautiful.
And that is built exactly the same way as the backup Yoda was that I put together. And what you've seen actually so far isn't the finished Yoda. We have not quite the eyes that I have in that Yoda are a little different to Yoda's eyes. Because I need something more durable and less breakable for me to drag from conventions and through airports and various other things. And the mechanism on it has been designed for one puppeteer instead of 4 puppeteers. So it's slightly different. I call it my light version of Yoda.
Diet Yoda.
The one that is coming now has the eyes painted by the same artist that painted the original eyes in '79, and a costume that has been archivally matched to the original costume. So, and that one will be in the museum here, rather than being dragged from place to place.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I mean, it's I did that because I started it just because I felt that we needed to show how that technology was done for that point in time. And I to be quite honest, there haven't been many characters since that have captured people's hearts in quite the same way that Yoda did for
absolutely
for the
correct.
world's first animatronic puppet.
Certainly, outside of the the ensemble of like the Muppets or Sesame Street, where it takes like literally an ensemble of all of these sculpted puppet animatronic characters together, as opposed to like a standalone. I think you're absolutely correct.
But also the Muppets weren't really animatronic in that sense. They weren't glove puppets.
No,
they weren't socks, but they, they had moving mouths and eyes that might roll around just because gravity took the eyeball one way or the other way. They didn't have the mechanism. It wasn't until Dark Crystal and Labyrinth that they got into that. And even then, I don't think they had the subtlety that Frank Oz brought to Yoda. Frank Oz is also, you cannot underestimate the impact of Frank Oz's performance and also of Kurt's courage to give Yoda time. I felt that was one of the things in episode 8. They rushed through Yoda. It was like they were afraid people would look at it for too long. And they shot through that scene. If we had shot through the scene of Yoda raising the X-Wing out of the swamp, people wouldn't have fallen in love with him the way that they did. If you hadn't had those moments, those moments where he sat there and went, that is why you fail, It's like, if they'd said, that is why you fail, and moved on, cut, you're gone, it just wouldn't have had the same impact. We really
totally
got
agree.
to know him as a personality. And Frank Oz performed a puppet as if it was a person. And it was so effective that the director would give instructions to the puppet instead of giving instructions to the puppeteers.
Yep. Oh, I remember hearing those stories, like how he's talking directly to it and looking him in the eyes, and wait, no, it takes a second because he's so believable in his performances that you just think it's another cast member. You expect to see them at the at the lunch table with you afterwards, but there he is in his box. But anyway, Nick, like, we got to have you back, man. This has been absolutely phenomenal. And I may have to cut this
Okay,
into...
well, we can talk about the rest of my career then, and then we'll talk about sailing around the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I'm
being-
talking about. Yeah.
And making, living a life as an artist or as an author. Every time I get a little tired of what I'm doing, I reinvent myself and make something else. So, I always thought I'd like to be an artist. So I'm sitting in the Caribbean, I'll do that. It's all based on the same principles. If you believe in yourself and if you push yourself, you can, if you look confident and you can make people believe that you should be there and they should have faith in you to do something,
Then do
they'll
it.
let you do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
So
Love it.
you have to go for it.
Absolutely love it.
Thank you so much.
Nick,
If anybody wants to find me, they can find me on Facebook as Nick Maley, or they can, if they have any trouble with that, just look for Yoda Guy Movie Exhibit. That's on Facebook as well. We've got lots of websites. If you go to thatyodaguy.com, that's a hub, and it'll send you off in different directions depending upon whether you want to buy something or whether you just want stories about making movies or whatever it is that you want. So
I think
the
it's
biography is at nickmaley.com. I mean, there's lots of options.
perfect.
Fantastic.
Perfect. Yeah, that's absolutely. And I'll give a shout out to StarNet as well. Your other I think it's every Sunday you run these.
Pretty much every Sunday. What I do is I do a webcast. I do it through Facebook and YouTube as well. But anybody who subscribes to StarNet Events group will, every Sunday they'll have the option to see something, and they're all about creativity. They're all about either people who made a career for themselves. They may be about distinguished people who made great, famous movies, or they might be about making armor for cosplay, or they might be about making props, or they might be about something else. We have a lot of range of different people, and I try to do them every Sunday, although I think this Sunday I might drop because the person I was expecting to get has just told me they can't do it, and we're going to have to put them off for 3 weeks or something. And then it's already Friday night, so something else up. It's getting a bit close to it, but
For sure.
But generally speaking, and those sit around for quite a while. So anyone who joins StarNet Events Group now will be able to look back at a lot of the videos that we've done, during the course of this year. And we started to do it as a way of thanking the people who support us through this period where the museum has no income other than through those people on the internet that are helping us. So we have a Patreon page where people subscribe and pay, $5 or $10, or we do have some that pay $100, to support us each month. And so we started to do StarNet just as a way of giving them something back for that support. But it's taken a life of its own. If anybody wants to do that, by the way, you go to patreon.com/FYSF, which is Follow Your Star Foundation. And you'll find us there.
Absolutely beautiful. Nick, thank you so much for your time tonight. I can't thank you enough. This is, as a lifelong Star Wars fan, someone who I can't remember a time in my life that I didn't know who Yoda was. I don't remember not knowing Star Wars, so it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And again, you're always welcome on the show. We'll be more than happy to help support you any way that we can. Everyone, please go check out Nick's book. Check out StarNet. Check out anything that's on the in that Yoda Guy hub. That Yoda Guy hub. It's nothing but wonderful content and so much entertainment, and just the least we could do to give back to you as well as the other creators who have brought us so much joy over the years. So again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts so much.
Well, thank you. And if anybody does want that book, the easiest way to get it is through Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You can buy it online. I think I get about 13 cents every time they sell one. Don't expect to make a fortune as a writer, by the way. that doesn't really work out very well unless you sell millions of copies. But anyway, the point is that all these principles that I've been talking about are in that book. And because I didn't want to bore anybody, I made sure that there weren't any chapters that were longer than 1 page. And so, it's a very easy book to read. You read 1 page a day at breakfast in the morning, and it just helps keep you on track as you head on your route to find the destiny that you want. One of the things that's in there, it says, don't let the insecurities of who you are today spoil the possibilities of who you're destined to become.
Oh, we got to end on that note. That's beautiful.
Yes.
That's absolutely beautiful. Nick, again, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your time. And we'll see you soon, I hope.
I'm sure you will. Okay.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Nick.
you.
Thank you. So, hey, that was just amazing. Thanks a lot again to Nick. Super excited to have had him on. Like, we could have talked to him for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
And what's really cool about the interview we just had with Nick is that, like, I fully kind of went into it just wanting to talk about Star Wars. And of course we'd want to just talk about Star Wars. This is a Star Wars podcast. However, his insight on life and everything he told us about sort of his upbringing and leading him to where he got was so fascinating. Like, I feel like we could have talked to him for hours and hours.
Honestly, I would have run through a wall after listening to him talk about like that. Like, I just feel so empowered, and so, like, he's so right though. You just 1 centimeter each day towards your end goal. As long as you're not, you're not going back, you're not doubting yourself. And it's that fear. It is that inherent fear that keeps us back from so many great things. But hey, he's living proof that you can fake it till you make it, and really have an impact on your world, living out your dreams. So again, thank you, Nick, and looking forward to having you back on the show. Can't wait to hear more from you, and everyone go follow Nick and all of his platforms. Buy that book. I know I'm going to pick up a copy immediately, and looking forward to, again, just reading that over my breakfast and getting the day started on the right foot.
Yeah, I can't wait to read that, honestly. Like, just hearing about it, and it's just fantastic. And just his outlook on life to me was just brilliant. And to never give up, and it actually reaffirms us doing this podcast, right? And giving this our all and really doing it, like, just to not give up. I thought, yeah, can't
100%.
thank him enough. Can't thank him enough.
Yep, can't wait to chat with him again.
Yeah, so I just want to thank everyone again for hanging out with us today, for listening to the interview with Nick, listening to our updates and us kind of banter back and forth. As Pat said, we're going to hope to release today's episode in probably episode 4 and episode 4.5, as Pat mentioned. But again, thanks a lot. Please punch that subscribe button. Give us a rating. We always greatly appreciate it.
For sure. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter now as well, at Good Morning Alderaan. If you have any questions, or if you'd like anything to discuss, or if there's any corrections you'd like to highlight for us, you can send us an email, gmalderaan@gmail.com. And on behalf of my co-host and I, as well as Nick, just want to say thanks again for listening. And hey, always be a Jedi in the streets
And a Sith in the sheets.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.